You've seen people disappear before, on the news, in missing person reports, maybe even in a crowded place just for a moment, when someone slips out of sight, swallowed by the moving tide of the world. But this was different. One moment, he was there, and the next, he wasn't. No scream, no struggle, no sign of distress. He simply ceased to exist. The people around him kept walking. Some glanced in his direction, unaware that they were witnessing something impossible, something that should never happen. Authorities searched, experts analyzed the footage, but no one could explain what happened to him. And yet, he was never seen again. Some say it was a trick of the light, a camera malfunction, a mistake. But others aren't so sure. This is the story of the man who vanished in broad daylight, caught on camera, yet lost forever. March 14th, 2022, 3:42 p.m. A man walked down this street heading home from work. His name was Daniel Robinson. He was 34 years old. Daniel lived a routine life. He worked as an IT technician at a local firm, had a small apartment in the city, and kept to himself. He wasn't famous. He had no enemies, no criminal record, no history of mental illness. He was, by all accounts, just another face in the crowd. And yet, on this day, at this exact moment, he disappeared. No warning, no struggle, no sound. One second he was there, the next, he wasn't. The people around him kept walking. A woman passed where he had been standing, unaware that she had just stepped through the space where a man had vanished. A cyclist rode by. A man checked his watch. Life continued, undisturbed. Authorities were called. The footage was reviewed. But no matter how many times they played it, the result was the same. The camera never glitched. There was no obstruction, no blind spots, just absence. A man erased in real time. Daniel Robinson never came home that night. His phone went straight to voicemail. His front door remained locked. His bed was undisturbed, as if he had never left, or as if he had never existed at all. But the call would never be returned. Some say he ran away. Some say he staged his disappearance. But if that were true, how do you explain the footage? This is the story of the man who vanished in broad daylight, caught on camera, yet lost forever. When investigators first examined the footage, they assumed there had to be an explanation. A blind spot in the camera, a technical glitch, maybe even deliberate tampering. But every possible theory led to the same impossible conclusion. The footage was real. Daniel Robinson was there, and then he wasn't. The last person to speak to Daniel was his co-worker, Adam Palmer. They had left the office together that afternoon, walking to the train station before parting ways. Adam remembered nothing unusual, no strange behavior, no sense that anything was wrong. But after Daniel disappeared, Adam admitted to something odd, something he hadn't thought much of at the time. He was fine, totally normal. But right before we split up, he did something weird. He stopped walking, just stood there like he was listening to something. I asked if he was okay, and he just nodded, like he wasn't even hearing me. What was Daniel listening to? A voice, a sound, something no one else could hear. At first, police searched the area. They combed through hours of surveillance footage, hoping to catch sight of him elsewhere. But after he vanished from that frame, he was never seen again. There was no sign of a struggle, no witnesses reporting anything unusual. His belongings, his wallet, phone, keys, were never found. The investigation was turning up nothing. But then his family stepped forward with a disturbing revelation. Leah Robinson told detectives that in the weeks leading up to his disappearance, Daniel had started acting strangely. Who or what was following Daniel Robinson? And if someone was watching him, why didn't they appear in any of the footage? The footage was reviewed hundreds of times, each frame analyzed. No one was near him, no one grabbed him. And yet, when asked to describe his fear in those final days, his sister used one word. The deeper investigators looked into Daniel's disappearance, the stranger it became. He had no history of paranoia, no involvement in anything criminal. But his search history, retrieved from his laptop, suggested otherwise. What had Daniel seen? And more importantly, had it seen him back? The case remained open. His family searched, the police searched, but no new evidence ever emerged. But then, 6 months later, another man disappeared. Same location, same circumstances, same impossible absence. The disappearance of Daniel Robinson was more than an unsolved mystery. It was an impossibility. The kind of event that shouldn't happen. The kind that forces you to question reality itself. The footage was dissected by experts, crime analysts, digital forensics teams. The possibility of a hoax was ruled out, and yet the most baffling detail wasn't what they saw, but what they didn't. In the span of 0.6 seconds, he was erased. The process wasn't instant. It wasn't a jump cut. It was something else, something beyond comprehension. But then, 6 months later, the impossible happened again. At first, no one connected the two cases. Anthony Carter wasn't linked to Daniel Robinson in any way. They had never met, never crossed paths. But their disappearances were identical, caught on camera, vanishing without explanation. And just like Daniel, Anthony had spoken of being followed. The pattern was undeniable, the circumstances impossible, and yet, the deeper authorities looked, the stranger it became. If these were abductions, why was there never a perpetrator? If these were accidents, where were the bodies? If these were hoaxes, how were they done live in public with no errors, no evidence, no human interference? Sightings, a vague term. But as investigators scoured reports from both cases, they found something chilling. Something both men had described before they vanished. I don't know how to explain it. I'll be walking and suddenly it's like something shifts. Like I've stepped into the wrong version of reality. And then, for just a second, I feel it, watching me. I swear I saw someone outside my window, but when I looked again, they were gone, like they were never there. Both men described the same sensation, a feeling of being observed by something just beyond the edges of reality, something they couldn't see, until it was too late. What were they seeing? And why were they the only ones who could? For months, the disappearances of Daniel Robinson and Anthony Carter remained unsolved. No evidence, no witnesses, no logical explanation. And then, something happened. Dispatch, this is Unit 47, parked at Hawthorne and 6th. No sign of disturbance. Will continue patrol. And then, he sees it. It was Daniel Robinson. That's not possible. The footage stutters, the hum intensifies. Something is wrong. Officer Rogers reported the sighting immediately. But when backup arrived, there was nothing. No footprints, no disturbances, no evidence that anyone had been there at all. Temporary loss of time, a detail that seemed small until another officer, one reviewing the footage, experienced the same phenomenon. A lapse, a moment of unaccounted for absence, as if something had reached through the screen itself. It wasn't just blurry. It wasn't just distorted. It was wrong. Daniel Robinson had vanished without a trace, but now, 6 months later, something that looked like him had returned. And this time, it was Anthony Carter. What happens to the people who vanish? 2 disappearances, 2 impossible returns, and now, the final sighting. Was this Daniel Robinson? Or was it something that only looked like him? The image lasted less than half a second, but for those who saw it, those who studied the footage frame by frame, the answer was clear. Was this Daniel trying to return, or had something else taken his place? Officially, the investigation ended here. The case was closed, the footage archived, no further resources allocated. But people kept seeing them, not just Daniel, not just Anthony. Reports surfaced across different cities, different countries, figures standing in the distance, motionless, watching, their faces blurred, their bodies slightly wrong. What if this wasn't just an isolated event? What if somewhere out there the people who vanish don't truly disappear? If you saw them, would you recognize them? Or would you only notice when it was too late? What do you think happened to Daniel Robinson and Anthony Carter? Are they lost in some unseen reality, or have they become something else entirely? Leave your theories in the comments below. And if you ever see a figure standing just beyond the street lamp, staring, unmoving, look away.